This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Beijing is all set to host a grand celebration to mark 100 years of the Communist Party of China. Relief after multi-billion-dollar budget for UN peacekeeping operations is approved for the next year. And underprivileged children in Nigeria get a platform to discuss issues affecting them. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in business is Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Nigeria plans to borrow nearly $4 billion to acquire a stake in the Dangote refinery plant. And authorities in Egypt expect to resume the country's initial public offering program in September after pandemic-induced delays. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thanks, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. We begin in China, where a grand celebration has been planned in the capital, Beijing, to mark 100 years of the Communist Party of China. Main festivities will be held at the Tiananmen Square on Thursday. General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, Xi Jinping, is also China's president, will address the event. Sen Yuan tells us more.
I want to share with these 8 aspects. Some are taking place tomorrow on July the 1st and also in the past couple of days, but some of them are also happening throughout the year. And the second and the third is actually, one is the celebration that's happening tomorrow that's ongoing, and then the third one is actually the medal ceremony that's already took place yesterday, and also exhibition with theme to honor CPC party's history as well as party's development. And then the fifth aspect is actually the big gala to celebrate the 100th founding anniversary of the CPC. On the sixth aspect is actually academic discussion on building the party as well as on research of the party's history. The seventh is actually publication of literature and artwork, including TV series, film, and performances. The eighth is actually exhibition at historical location and tourist destination that has strong link to the party history.
Our special coverage of the grand ceremony will begin at 6 a.m. Beijing time tomorrow. The ceremony is scheduled to begin 2 hours later. Zambians have congratulated China ahead of the centenary celebrations of the Communist Party of China. They've also praised China for its achievements under the leadership of the CPC.
The CPC is regarded worldwide as the biggest and most important organization, leading masses and masses of people. But I think what is unique about the achievements of the CPC is the miracle explained by the statistics that come out of China. You're talking about 100 million people out of poverty. Those, by statistics of other nations, those are a couple of nations completely taken out of poverty. That's not a mean achievement. It's tremendous. It's something that blows your mind just to think about what did China do just to make sure they have this great success of building a moderately prosperous society.
Kenya's ruling Jubilee Party and China's Communist Party have continued to enjoy cordial relations despite challenges brought forth by the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Enoch Sekolia spoke with Jubilee's Secretary General Raphael Tuju.
Thank you so much and welcome to CGTN. Now, since the establishment of the Jubilee Party, there have been a relationship between the ruling party here in Kenya and the ruling party in China, that is the CPC. So from your own assessment, how can you say the progress has been?
Well, we're very keen on that relationship. Unfortunately, it's been disrupted by the problem of COVID, so we're not able to exchange the visits as we used to exchange previously. They would visit us and we would visit them. But we have continued to try the best we can. We meet through Zoom and, through the internet, so to speak. It's not the same as actually being there physically or them being here physically. And of course, political activities was greatly hampered by the COVID pandemic. But our relations are excellent, and we want to continue to work on those relationships.
Okay, you've talked about COVID-19 and especially how it has hampered the progress of the relationship between the two parties. But my question would be, has the relationship also helped, for example, in tackling the pandemic?
Of course, it has helped. I mean, the thing is that we did receive a lot of, real support in terms of PPs, in terms of, other items that we needed as a country. So in this particular issue of COVID-19, again, the people of China through CPC was able to, step up and be of helpful to this country directly.
As the Secretary General of the ruling party, what have you been doing in coordination to ensure that despite the rising nationalism in the world, the cordial relationship between Jubilee and CPC continue to progress?
Well, the CPC is a beacon for us to look up to. Indeed, CPC is celebrating its 100th anniversary, which is a major achievement. I mean, not very many parties survive that long, and especially in the African context and the Kenyan context, we're not doing very well in that particular respect. But it is the beacon that we look up to. It's the biggest political party in the world. It's the greatest political party of all time. And I'm not saying this just because of its size and because of, the country it comes from and because they are our friends. But no party has presided over such transformation of the humankind as the CPC has done. I mean, to get 700 million people out of abject poverty is a feat which has got no precedent in the history of mankind. And also just the level of development. I mean, I always tell people that when I was a small kid in grade 5, grade 6, we used to have pictures of the obtaining situation of China. And the most enduring picture is that of Chinese in rice fields, Chinese farmers in rice fields with straw hats. Now, this is a country now which is having a space program, space exploration program. This is a country which is now, the second largest, biggest economy in the whole world. And this has happened in one generation.
The Communist Party of China has come a long way since its founding in 1921 and says it never stops learning, growing, and contributing. Zhang Dan has more.
In its modern history, China had endured many foreign invasions. During times of war and revolution, the CPC reached out to global organizations such as the Communist International and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in a bid to bring about a successful Chinese revolution, victory in the anti-fascist war, and to win peace for China and the world. And peace has long been the CPC's top priority. In the 1950s, the party initiated the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, including mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. These 5 principles were later set as the basis for Asian and African countries to establish friendship and cooperation at the 1955 Bandung Conference in Indonesia. Then Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai, who was also foreign minister, attended the meeting and put forward the resounding principle of seeking common ground while shelving differences. And the People's Republic of China has never stopped trying to make its voice heard. In 1971, China resumed its legal seat in the United Nations. 30 years later, China officially joined the World Trade Organization and gradually opened up its enormous market and attracted massive foreign investment. And since the 18th National Congress of the CPC in late 2012, China has been engaging even more actively with the world. Following the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic in late 2019, China has been offering a helping hand to countries in need. Under the guidance of the Communist Party of China, and thanks to the solidarity of its people, China has been able to largely contain the virus and rebound from its economic impact. And as the world witnessed uneven distributions of vaccines, China, as one of the biggest vaccine manufacturers, extended its helping hand. Apart from vaccinating its own people, China has provided aid to more than 80 countries and 4 international organizations. It's also exported vaccines to more than 40 countries, while working with more than 10 nations in vaccine research, development, and production. The country is providing an initial batch of 10 million doses to the global program COVAX. Overall, it has sent more than 350 million doses of its COVID vaccines overseas. The pandemic has made it clear that nobody is safe until everybody is safe. It's a lesson that can be easily applied to climate change as well. Chinese President Xi Jinping, also the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, has called for joint efforts in battling climate change at a Global Leaders Summit on Climate in April.
We need to work on the basis of international law, follow the principle of equity and justice, and focus on effective actions. We need to uphold the UN-centered international system. We need to comply with the UN framework on climate change and the Paris Agreement, and strive to deliver on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals.
China says it aims to peak carbon emissions by 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2060, and the commitments are based on solid achievements in carbon reduction. The country's carbon intensity has dropped by 48.1% by the end of 2019 from the 2005 level. From 2012 to 2019, China's GDP grew by an annual average of 7%, while the energy consumed to achieve this only increased by an annual average of 2.8%. Apart from climate goals, China has also been promoting what it calls high-quality cooperation of mutual benefits. President Xi proposed the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013. The massive program aims to connect Asia, Africa, and Europe via land and maritime networks. The goal is to improve regional integration, increase trade, and stimulate economic growth. So far, over 170 countries and international organizations had signed over 200 agreements with China under the Belt and Road.
I have noted on various occasions that the Belt and Road Initiative is a public road open to all, not a private path owned by one single party. All interested countries are welcome to take part in the cooperation and share its benefits. Belt and Road cooperation pursues development, aims for mutual benefits, and conveys a message of hope.
The program goes along with President Xi's proposal to build a community with a shared future for mankind. Zhang Dan, CGTN.
The UN has finalized a deal on a new multi-billion-dollar peacekeeping budget for the following year. It came a day before the June 30th deadline. The agreement averts what would have been a shutdown of all 12 peacekeeping missions around the world. Reporting from New York, here is our correspondent, Liling Tan.
Down to the final hours, a deal to greenlight a new $6 billion peacekeeping budget was reached and ready for the UN General Assembly to formalize. Now, it seems that just a day before a June 30th deadline was set to expire, UN member nations managed to overcome their differences to keep peacekeeping operations running for the year starting July 1st and avert what could have been a major crisis.
Based on the scenario, we will have the necessary spending authority from July 1st without any operational shutdowns, which is good news. Curtailment of operations, as you know, will have limited the ability of the mission to implement their mandates, including, for example, supporting countries in COVID response, protection of civilians, and other critical missions, activities.
It is unclear what held up the deal, but various reports cited issues around negotiation procedures and logistics, as well as disagreement between China and Western nations. The U.S. accounts for the largest share of the UN peacekeeping budget at nearly 28%, followed by China at slightly over 15%. And before the deal was finalized, UN headquarters had advised its peacekeeping missions to put in place contingency plans in the event that no agreement was reached in time. Such a scenario would have meant that UN money would only go toward safeguarding UN assets and protecting UN staff and peacekeepers on the ground. Li Tan, CGTN, New York.
A shutdown of the UN's global peacekeeping missions could have greatly impacted the maintenance of peace and security in Africa. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has some perspective from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
A fragile security situation in the east of the DRC. Rebel attacks have left hundreds of people dead in Ituri and North Kivu province since the beginning of the year. UN peacekeepers have been helping the DRC army protect residents, but they have had to reduce their troop numbers due to funding shortfalls over the years.
We are also under pressure to reduce our budget, so we do need to prioritize the areas where we feel like we can make the most difference. That doesn't mean that the places that we leave are completely stable or are perfectly peaceful. It means that we assess that they reached a level of stability that can be handled by the Congolese authorities.
The UN recently sought a new budget of $6 billion to run its peacekeeping missions worldwide from July 1st to June 30th next year. It warned of a possible shutdown of its missions if the money was not approved soon. But UN member states have passed the budget in the nick of time. That means the UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC, known as MONUSCO, one of the largest in the world, can continue to operate. But the mission recently came under sharp criticism for failing to protect civilians from rebel attacks in eastern DRC.
It has been a waste having this mission in the DRC. It has been a waste of resources that the United Nations could have been utilized differently. You may know that the mission has been in this country for more than 2 decades, and they have been financed extremely, almost in every domain. They have gotten the money to do whatever the mission was supposed to be in Congo. But unfortunately, the result has not been there.
For many Congolese, the mission has overstayed its welcome.
If those UN troops leave our country, I will be very happy because they have been here for a very long time, but we have not seen any change in our security situation.
The UN currently operates 12 peacekeeping missions around the world. Most of them are in the Middle East and Africa. The troops have supported countries rocked by conflict like Mali and the Central African Republic. The budget of the UN peacekeeping operations is supposed to be raised from contributions by the 193 member states who make up the General Assembly, but the bulk of the contributions have traditionally been made by the US, followed by China and Japan. UN officials say the approval of the $6 billion budget has averted a looming crisis. The budget will be formally adopted on Wednesday. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Time now for us to take a short break and return. More news making headlines, including Ethiopian government withdraws army from Tigray, citing a limited threat to sovereignty. And underprivileged children in Nigeria get a platform to discuss issues affecting them.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
We've come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. The Ethiopian government says it has withdrawn its army from most of Tigray because the Tigray People's Liberation Front is no longer a threat to its sovereignty. Since November last year, government troops have been fighting across forces loyal to the TPLF, the former ruling party in Tigray. Ethiopian officials say it's now the TPLF which should be held accountable for everything happening in Tigray, including humanitarian aid. Here's CGTN's Giram Chala with more.
Talking to the media, the State Minister of Foreign Affairs, Redwan Hussein, and head of Ethiopia's Defense Engineering Department, Lieutenant General Bach Adebele, said the withdrawal of the Ethiopian army from Mekelle, the capital of Tigray, and other towns is a political decision.
Even if we declare ceasefire just because we are there, they will continue claiming that the government has killed people after doing it themselves. After blocking access roads, they will blame us. So therefore, we have decided to withdraw our troops and make it clear for everyone. This will also pave the way for the farmers to do their work free of conflict. This is a political decision. By no means is it a military decision.
When we entered Tigray, we aimed to undertake a law enforcement mission there. We had no intention of liberating Mekelle or other cities of the region in the first place. The value of Mekelle back then and its value now are incomparable. Then it was the center of gravity and the center for the outlaws, and we had to capture it. But today, Mekelle is a burden to us. We are policing gangs as it has lost its relevance.
Still, TPLF sources say it's them who drove the Ethiopian government force out of Mekelle and other strategic towns in Tigray. They promised they would continue their offensive until what they called all alien forces are no longer present in the region. Ethiopia's army says if there is a need for it to return to Mekelle, it will.
We can no longer exert any effort to fight this junta. TPLF is no longer a threat to Ethiopia's sovereignty. It was a threat back then when it had military and political capabilities. Not today. By the way, if they dare to provoke any conflict and never respect the ceasefire proposed, we will return and enter into Mekelle in no time. We can do it today if need be. But I assure you, the damage will be beyond imagination.
The government also said from now on it won't take responsibility for any happenings in its northern region.
Those who have claimed the Ethiopian government has denied them humanitarian access roads, now they can maneuver around to deliver aid. They had this chance before, but we were the culprits in their eyes. Now we are out, and let's see what will happen. The international community must focus mainly on providing aid for the most vulnerable and place its blame where it belongs.
Ethiopia has also confirmed the withdrawal of Eritrean troops from Tigray, and sources from TPLF also verified this. The hope now is for the unilateral ceasefire declared by the federal government to be also shared by TPLF so that peace talks can finally begin. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
We head over to Somalia now, where political leaders have agreed to hold a long-delayed presidential election on October the 10th. The decision comes after months of deadlock that turned violent at times. The National Consultative Council issued the country's election schedule and also agreed on a 50% reduction of registration fees for female candidates vying for parliamentary seats. The release of the new schedule has been welcomed by many residents who hope the move will help strengthen peace and stability in Somalia.
On the election timetable, leaders agreed that training of election committees will take place between 30th of June and 5th of July 2021. Upper House election is scheduled for the 25th of July 2021. Polling stations will be ready by 23rd of July. Registration of delegates to participate in the voting exercise will be done on the 10th of August 2021. Lower House MP's election will run between 10th of August 2021 and 10th September 2021. Election of Lower House Speaker and deputies will be on the 20th of September 2021. And finally, Somali President will take place on the 10th of October 2021.
The new released election schedule is a step forward considering the election squabble that we have had. We have a lot of challenges and differences concerning the election. We consider this an achievement.
It's the second week of the UN Human Rights Council meeting. The council has been holding a dialogue on trafficking in persons, especially women and children. Tunisia is among the African countries battling various forms of human trafficking. Experts say the North African state has become a transit point for traffickers of men, women, and children. Andin Shuashi reports.
Tunisian authorities called for the implementation of a national strategy to fight against child trafficking. Experts have said that this phenomenon has spread since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in the North African country.
The current situation where many children are exploited by unscrupulous adults is very alarming, and we're always on the alert. Fighting child trafficking is the responsibility of the government, the family, and civil society. Once they leave school, it's easy for criminals to use these children who are under the age of 16.
The Ministry of Women, Family, Child and Elderly Affairs revealed that women and young girls are the most at risk of becoming victims of trafficking in Tunisia. In fact, thousands of Tunisian women and girls are forced to work as domestic servants due to their deplorable social and economic situation.
The phenomenon of domestic servitude is a form of human trafficking. Our objective is to empower women and girls in rural areas so that they are not forced to work as servants while they could have a better life. We encourage them to report any trafficking attempts.
Tunisia is also fighting domestic and international criminal networks which are responsible for human trafficking and migrant smuggling in the Mediterranean region.
Some local and foreign trafficking networks are taking advantage of irregular migration flows. We know the existence of these criminal groups which view human trafficking as a business and human beings as goods.
Tunisian President Kais Saied declared that all slavery-like practices, especially human trafficking, will be criminalized.
The National Anti-Human Trafficking Commission revealed that it had recorded more than 1,400 cases of human trafficking in 2020. Statistics also showed that half of the victims are women, children, and undocumented migrants. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The UN Human Rights Council meeting is also addressing the vulnerability of elderly people to climate change disruptions. This follows a recent report which reveals that 2/3 of people aged 60 or over live in low and middle income countries prone to disasters. Extreme weather in the form of droughts, floods, heat waves, among others, pose specific risks for older people. The effects include high mortality rates, reduced mobility, and increased illnesses. Here's some views from Somalia, where millions of people regularly face severe food shortages.
During my early days, Somalia was a prosperous country. There were frequent droughts like we witness now. We never used to feel the effects of drought when it happened because we had a lot of good seasons. But now everything has changed. The droughts, floods and erosions and winds happen more frequently than ever.
I remember the Dabadia drought, and the revolutionary government led by Siad Barre tried all means to help people. They took people to fertile areas around the river Juba and Shabelle, and these people were mostly from the northern region. The drought claimed the lives of many old people. It was like the drought was sent to leave only the young people alive.
The government should come up with a statistical plan to save people's lives. There's also need for a better security situation and complete plan for food, education and healthcare of people living in Somalia, particularly for the older people.
West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, and other partners have launched a parliamentary-style discussion forum for children who live on the streets. The intervention serves as a voice for deprived and abandoned children in the region. With more details of that initiative, here's Kelechi Emekelam.
I'm sorry. Children right now, as I speak to you, they sleep with animals at abattoirs because they don't have anywhere to sleep. And there's very little we can do.
Pains of a compassionate child rights activist, compelled to bring change to a situation that's long troubled Nigeria and West Africa, Zainab Khalil set up Yadai, a center that focuses on the rehabilitation of children who are abandoned, many that are victims of abuse or child labor. The center recently partnered with the ECOWAS Parliament and UNICEF to launch the Street Children Parliament, an initiative aimed at giving street children a voice.
And what we intend doing is drawing the attention of the government, bringing the children, let them tell their story, giving them a louder voice. And when you give them a louder voice, you now draw the attention of government to do the needful. And it was as a result of that that we even drew ECOWAS.
The International Labour Organization's 2017 report showed an estimated 168 million children globally are engaged in child labor. 15 million of them are in Nigeria, the highest number of working children in West Africa. In the face of issues like abject poverty and Islamist insurgency, children are forced into the streets to fend for themselves and their families.
So you find children uncared for, not by the mother, not by the father, and what do you expect them to do? They go to the street to find a way of sustaining themselves. Or are you talking about the insurgency? You see IDP camps all over the place, internal displaced persons all over the place. And from there, these children move to the street because they have to survive.
Child rights activists say the network of support for children is still very weak in West Africa, and it will take more than establishing a street children parliament to close the gaps. Governments would need to enforce laws and policies geared towards upholding the rights and safety of children. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's recap our top stories. In China, a grand celebration has been planned in the capital, Beijing, to mark 100 years of the Communist Party of China. Main festivities will be held at the Tiananmen Square on Thursday. General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, Xi Jinping, who's also China's president, will address the event. The UN has finalized a deal on a new multi-billion-dollar peacekeeping budget for the next year. It came a day before the June 30th deadline. The agreement averts what would have been a shutdown of all 12 peacekeeping missions around the world. And the Ethiopian government says it has withdrawn its army from most of Tigray because the Tigray People's Liberation Front is no longer a threat to its sovereignty. Since November last year, government troops have been fighting forces loyal to the TPLF, the former ruling party in Tigray. Ethiopian officials say it's now the TPLF which should be held accountable for everything happening in Tigray, including humanitarian aid. And those were the stories making headlines this hour. Let's now take a short break, but before we do, here is Rama with the latest in business.
That's right, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Nigeria plans to borrow nearly $4 billion to buy a stake in the Dangote refinery plant. And Egypt expects to resume its initial public offering program in September after COVID-induced delays.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in West Africa. Nigeria's state-owned petroleum company plans to borrow $3.8 billion in order to buy a 20% stake in the Dangote refinery. According to the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Managing Director, the money will be borrowed from a range of financial institutions. The soon-to-be commissioned refinery is reputed to be Africa's largest single oil refinery. On completion, it will be the world's largest single-train facility of its kind. The $15 billion facility with a 650,000 barrel per day refining capacity is expected to come online in early 2022. It's expected to be able to process light and medium grades of crude, including petrol and diesel, and also produce jet fuel and polypropylene as well. Elsewhere, the International Monetary Fund has granted to Sudan a $2.5 billion loan. And the East African nation is also on track to receive debt relief from the institution. Now, the 39-month-long IMF Extended Credit Facility loan will essentially give Khartoum $1.5 billion immediately. The decision comes after Sudan cleared roughly $1.4 billion in arrears owed to the IMF. By clearing those arrears, Sudan in turn is able to get access to debt relief from not just the IMF, but also the World Bank's Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, or HIPC as it's more commonly known. Now, that program will provide relief to Sudan to reduce its current foreign debt burden from around $56.6 billion down to $6 billion in net present value terms over about 3 years. Elsewhere, the head of Egypt's Financial Regulatory Authority expects the government to resume its IPO program in September with 3 offerings on the table. Egypt's IPO program kicked off some 2 years ago with a $12 billion loan with the IMF that was signed back in 2016. Now, proceeding with the program was reiterated by the standby agreement Egypt signed with the IMF last year as a step to deepen structural reforms underpinned by the fund. The North African state back in July 2017 declared that the oil firm ENPPI as the frontrunner for the privatization initiative's maiden offering before then backing out. It was Egypt's tobacco monopoly, Eastern Company, that led the way by listing 4.5% of its shares in March 2019. Onto the opposite end of the continent, authorities in South Africa have tightened lockdown restrictions as new COVID-19 cases just continue to rise. But that move has dampened rebounding business confidence at a time when the country is still trying to recover to pre-pandemic levels. Here's Angela Coppola with more.
South African authorities have confirmed that the Delta variant is responsible for many of the new infections in KwaZulu-Natal and the third wave of infections in Gauteng province.
These viruses need to continue mutating to try to evade the immune responses that's been targeted against the virus so that it can continue surviving and continue propagating essentially. So that is when you have these mutations which are basically making the virus relatively resistant to the antibody that is targeting specific proteins that are on the surface, which otherwise would be able to get rid of the virus.
As the variant spread, authorities have opened hundreds of vaccination sites. 58 of those are targeting the mining sector and currently going through the registration process.
We have now 5 sites that are vaccinating. The first site was on the 24th of May in the Platinum Belt. And I think we are at least satisfied that we have got something in Platinum, in the Northwest Province, which has the largest number of mine workers. We also have 2 sites in the coal sector, and we also have 2 other sites in the gold sector.
South Africa, like many other African countries, has suffered from a shortage of vaccines.
The vaccine shortage has not had as big an impact on us as the fact that our sites had not yet been approved. So we hope that, with more sites being approved, the issue of vaccine shortage will not be an issue, and it means we can really ramp up on the side of there's more sites, but there's also more vaccines available.
On a broader level, it's been suggested that experts will think differently about vaccines in future.
It's unlikely that we're going to be able to prevent resurgences from taking place or to stop the virus from circulating. In fact, elimination of this virus is no longer an option in the immediate future, and certainly not during the course of our lifetimes.
As the country moves into that next level of lockdown, there's some questions being asked about whether all the measures and restrictions that have been put in place are actually going to make a difference. The bottom line is we need vaccines, we need vaccinations, and they need to be done quickly. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still in South Africa, the country has finally initiated the switch from analog to digital broadcasting. Back in 2005, the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, declared that countries in Africa and other regions should be encouraged to migrate to a digital transmission platform. Now, South Africa, on the other hand, had fallen behind, and only now is it catching up to the markets on the continent. More on this story from CGTN's Sumitra Naidu.
South Africa missed the 2015 deadline set by the International Communications Union to complete the transition from analog to digital terrestrial television. This project has been plagued by delays, but it now seems to be moving along.
Since February up until, let's say, the end of May, we've switched off over 76 low power and high power sites. We are busy now with the Northern Cape. We are busy with the Limpopo, and we are also busy with the Northwest as well as Mpumalanga.
Earlier this year, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced in his State of the Nation address that the move to digital will be completed in all 9 provinces by March 2022.
So essentially, South Africa is, as we all know, way behind in the digital migration. The mobile networks haven't got sufficient spectrum, especially for a country like South Africa, to roll out advanced networks and, in fact, to roll out data at costs that South Africans can afford.
Mobile companies are desperately awaiting the move as it will free up spectrum.
That spectrum to be allocated to other things, most notably the mobile networks, and allow them to start rolling out 4G and 5G, in very low frequencies where television exists. So it's of paramount importance that South Africa speeds that up and gets the job done across the country in as short a possible time.
But the move to digital in a country like South Africa will leave millions unable to access TV networks. The South African Post Office is now making set-top boxes available to those that qualify.
USASA is ensuring that there's the voucher system that is given to people so that they can get the set-top boxes. Centec is doing the physical, switch off, as in you go to a site. And then the SAPC is basically giving the authorization to say, yes, this site now can be switched off because we think we will not lose audiences. Remember, on our side as the broadcaster, we don't want to lose our audiences.
Households receiving social grants or earning less than $225 per month will get set-top boxes at no cost. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Away from the continent now, a World Bank report focusing on China forecasts that economic growth in the world's second largest economy might actually reach 8.5% this year. That's before slowing down to 5.4% in 2022 as growth normalizes and the low base effect dissipates. According to this forecast, growth will be driven by improved consumer and business confidence as well as much stronger labour market conditions. On the supply side, the driving force of growth is forecast to transition from industrial production over towards services. The World Bank is pointing out that many areas may derail growth further, and that includes further outbreaks of COVID-19, bilateral tensions, corporate leverage, and of course the property market. But risks overall, in the bank's view, do remain relatively balanced. Onto the cryptocurrency market now. Bitcoin is still hovering around the $34,000–$35,000 level, recovering effectively from last week's regulatory crackdown in Beijing. In recent days, the world's largest cryptocurrency has touched half-year lows twice, shortly after China's central bank specifically required commercial banks and digital payment platforms to steer clear of crypto trading. Now, it did fall under $30,000 on the 22nd of June. That's the lowest price we've seen all year. Despite that plunge, though, industry experts are still seeing this crackdown from China as a positive development. They argue that it's, in the long term, it will boost the broader cryptocurrency market, as a move could help decentralize mining operations that are still very much concentrated at the moment in the Chinese mainland. Now, that opinion has lifted the overall sentiment and prices by extension for Bitcoin and other major cryptocurrencies as well. And I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In Global Business, we'll be looking at the World Bank's latest review of Kenya's economic performance. East Africa's largest economy is failing to generate sufficient jobs at a time when at least 10 million young people will be coming into the workforce in the decade between 2020 and 2029. So then, demographic boom or bust? We'll be exploring that in a bit more detail at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
We're looking forward to that, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. Let's now take a short break and return. More news, including a woman in Uganda rallies her community to recycle plastic waste to aid environment and conservation efforts.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's head over to Uganda now, where a Kampala-based entrepreneur continues to discover fascinating ways to recycle. Her skill in turning plastic waste to useful products is not only benefiting the environment, it's also increasing employment prospects for young people as well. Here is Leon Senyange with her story.
Chinawataka, a slum in Uganda's capital Kampala. More than 20,000 people live here. Most of their garbage ends up in places like these. But for this team, the straws are treasure, not trash.
We can collect like one sack because we can't find one, like 3 sacks at the same garbage. We usually move collecting.
Straws and plastic bottles make up an estimated 600 tons of plastics consumed in Uganda every day. 73-year-old Benedicta Nanyonga is at the forefront of waste management in this area. Through her organization, the Chinawataka Women's Initiative, she has built a movement to eliminate single-use plastics.
So many people around, you find that some, they do come and we have collected this. In returns, you give a token to her to encourage her or him to see that the plastic is being collected from the place where they are.
The collected plastics, mostly straws, are then turned into sellable merchandise. These are some of the products made here: mats, school bags, and even hand wallets. They are sold to help keep the project running, and there are plans to build a bigger training center so more young people can learn these skills. Harriet Nachaine has been here for 2 months now. She is one of over 6,000 young volunteers that have gained skills from the initiative.
I've got the skill of weaving because since my childhood I never involved myself in weaving.
While Benedicta has made significant progress, she still faces challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has kept many trainees away. The lack of proper tools is making work difficult.
Another problem is pressing the straws because it makes the fingers sometimes to swollen. And also it is a big problem that when we are pressing the straws, it decreases our production.
For Nanyonga, there is no giving up on the fight against plastics. She wants to continue raising public awareness, straw by straw. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
To South Africa now, where opposition continues to mount towards a new multi-million-dollar property development in Cape Town. The development could include the African headquarters of online giant Amazon. Indigenous groups, including the Khoi community, believe the development site is sacred land, which their ancestors first inhabited over 2,000 years ago. They want it recognized as a World Heritage Site. With more on that report, here's CGTN's Travis Andrews.
Groundwork is being laid for the River Club development site in Cape Town, which will include Amazon's African headquarters. The more than $300 million investment has been welcomed by the city, which believes it could provide a boost to the economy during a pandemic. However, the site is considered sacred to the Khoi and San community, who are reportedly the first inhabitants of the area.
The site that they've chosen is sacred to the Khoi. It's important environmentally. It's a site that has a huge amount of history. It's the site of the first resistance from indigenous peoples against colonial intrusion. It is very, very rich in history, and everybody agrees that it needs to be recognized as a heritage site.
Some within the Khoi community have been particularly vocal towards the development of the site, which will be anchored by Amazon's 70,000 square meters of offices. The River Club is also situated on a sensitive riverine environment where biodiversity could be threatened by development.
This particular precinct is on a floodplain, a confluence of two sacred rivers. It's known as Tamiro de Kayes, which means the place where the stars gather. It is of a spiritual and metaphysical sacredness to the San and Khoi, and the fact that it is under an immediate and urgent threat of 150,000 square meters of commercial bulk is something that really does concern us.
While the development of this site has already begun, interest groups are set to appeal its approval with a court application, which could take years to finalize. In the meantime, stakeholders opposed to the development believe the economic benefits of the investment can still be attained if the site is moved to a different location.
If this development happened elsewhere, it would probably create more jobs because this is a very difficult and expensive, complex area to build, so it's going to be very expensive. And for the same amount of money, you could have similar kinds of developments elsewhere, which would generate more jobs.
For now, though, the city hopes the project will create over 5,000 jobs during the construction phase and over 860 when it's completed. The stakeholders opposed to development, though, still plan on making their voices heard. Ravs Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Your sport news is coming up after the break, including thousands of fans return to football stadia and sporting arenas in Tunisia. Tens of thousands of football fans and other sport enthusiasts in Tunisia have returned to stadia from this week. The country's Ministry of Sport and Health Department has launched a COVID-19 rapid test campaign for people wishing to watch football matches or any other sporting activities across the country. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi tells us more.
Espérance Sportive de Tunis was the first club to launch a COVID-19 testing campaign for 5,000 fans in 24 hours. The success of the operation encouraged the Blood and Gold team and the authorities in Tunis to authorize the return of more spectators to the domestic and international tournaments.
We are respecting social distancing and the preventive measures during the rapid testing campaign. We urge all football and sports fans to help us. This is how we can save lives and convince the authorities to allow more spectators into stadiums.
Wajdi Trabilsi is a football fan who never misses a match. The general lockdown prevented him from following his favorite club, Espérance. Wajdi says from now on he will not miss any training or match.
I've tested negative. Now I can go to the stadium without worrying about infecting my friends or my family. There's no sport in an unsafe environment. Let's stay vigilant until the health crisis is over.
Many football fans have urged the Health Department and the Ministry of Youth and Sports to register all fans on the national vaccination platform.
Football fans are the 12th player on the pitch. There's no football without spectators. The experience of empty stadiums is the worst in sports history. Providing coronavirus rapid tests is the first step. It could be followed by the vaccination of fans to guarantee safety at sports facilities.
According to the Sports Department, the fan ban since the outbreak of the pandemic has had negative repercussions on thousands of clubs. Tunisians are hopeful that the return of fans will boost ticketing revenues.
The Tunisian health minister has criticized the return of fans to stadiums. The COVID-19 task force also said that this government decision was not approved by the scientific committee due to the dangerous health situation in the country. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.